Hello, everyone. My name is Jessica Sblendorio, and I'm an LLM student in the Comparative International Dispute Resolution Program at Queen Mary. And I've been asked, along with my teammate, Andra Tofan, to reflect upon our experiences this year in an international mediation competition. I'll talk a little bit more about the competition, but what we've been asked to do today is to reflect on our preparation and what we've learned to contribute to both our professional development and for our future legal careers in the field.
Hello everyone, my name is Andra Tofan and I'm in my third year of English and European Law, and alongside Jessica we won the CPR International Mediation Competition, and hopefully all the tips we're going to share are going to be very useful. So I'd like to, before we dive into the tips actually, Jessica, can you tell everyone a bit more about the competition itself?
Happy to. The competition that we competed in this year was the CPR International Mediation Competition. And what this competition does is it brings together teams from all over the world. This year it was held online for the first time ever, but it actually had schools from 5 different continents and a number of countries, which was a great learning experience for us. And what this competition does specifically is to simulate a mediation process of a dispute between companies. And as the competition progresses, you learn more about kind of different information that's contributing to the dispute, and you kind of progress through a negotiation simulation under mediation process. And we also were joined by another fellow LLB student, Parnian Mohammadi, who was the mediator for our team. Andra and I actually composed of a negotiations team of both counsel in my role and as client for Andra. And that was really interesting for us because we had to think strategically about what was the commercial role of the client versus the legal role of counsel. And that in particular was very realistic of what a mediation would require. So for us, that was something that was very interesting during the competition. And this reflections and the strategies we used actually contributed to our success in this particular competition. And I think something, talking about specifically about our success, I wanted to ask Andra specifically what the victory meant to her, and how do you think this will contribute to your further career, Andra?
Mm-hmm. I think you meant 2 things, and that's a bit philosophical, but our experience is definitely testimony to the fact that practice simply makes perfect. And everything you need is just a growth-oriented mindset, a very dedicated and motivated team, and hopefully a supportive coach, which in this scenario we had. Our coach was Lilit Nagapetian, who was with us from the beginning. And then results just came naturally and we got better every single round. And then secondly, on a similar note, you just need to put yourself out there for such competitions. We didn't know anything about mediation before we started, but once we started the process, we learned as we go. So it's just testimony to the fact that for everything we need to do that just to put ourselves out there. When it comes to how it contributes to my career, I definitely expanded my knowledge about ADR. My only exposure before the competition was to negotiation and arbitration, so it's great to know more about mediation. I definitely improved my negotiation skills in a mediation setting, which includes more parties and you're focused on the dispute instead of striking a deal, which is in the negotiation competitions I participated in. But maybe more importantly, as Jessica said, we have been against teams from other 4 continents. So when it comes to improving my legal career, definitely the competition improved my cultural intelligence. Sometimes we needed to take into account various cultural factors, and it's just great to be exposed to, let's say, legal profession at a worldwide scale. I want to ask you, Jessica, what are the biggest challenges in such a competition, especially when you progress from stage to stage?
And I think, Andra, you actually highlighted some of them as well, is that before we started this competition specifically, most of us had never actually participated in the mediation itself or been actually familiar with the process. And even if we knew the process itself, as I had kind of a training course on it previously, actually undertaking the mediation is an entirely different process and learnings. So I think something that was really helpful was to learn that mediation process, but also understand the strategies that need to go into that and the skills that are required for a successful mediation. As Andra mentioned, there's cross-cultural issues to keep into account, particularly in international competition. But here it's also important to think about what the client's goals are in the mediation, and as counsel, how you can progress those goals. When a party's in a mediation, it's not like court or arbitration where you're arguing and hoping that you win. Both parties are there to really find a solution, and that's an important factor to really keep in mind. And I think at each stage, we were really thinking about what were our interests and how could we actually move towards a settlement of the dispute and progress it forward. And I think that was a key learning for us, as how mediation is a facilitative process rather than an adjudicative process. And I think that was something that was really helpful and something we can take away, and was a challenge, but something that we kind of were able to reflect upon and succeed by understanding the process and embracing it throughout the competition.
Mm-hmm.
And I think something else kind of talking about with respect to that as well is, when we think about this, what did you find difficult in preparing for the competition, Andra? And what was more challenging about this environment, particularly because this was the first time the competition was online? I know we talked about kind of initially that this was virtual, but I know that throughout you and I had talked about different challenges and how we prepared for this competition.
I wouldn't classify our preparation process difficult, because with the support of our coach, I don't think we've been thrown into the deep end without knowing what to do. But what has been difficult is that for every single round, we needed to write different opening speeches, and we needed to place ourselves in the shoes of the party that we're playing. And I remember sometimes we were a bit unsure whether we're taking the right direction from a strategic point of view, because as the dispute progressed, in the beginning, one of the parties we were representing was a bit angry. Then the second round, we were more on a collaborative note. Then once again, more direct in terms of negotiations and what we were requesting. So it felt a bit back and forth. And before we actually encountered the other team to see what they were asking in the mediation process, I don't think we were 100% sure that this is the right way to go. So maybe the entire uncertainty regarding the confidential information was the most difficult aspect when it comes to our preparation. But the online environment, on your second point, obviously has pros and cons. I'm not sure how you feel about that, but it made definitely our communication during the mediation much easier, because I could text Jessica at all times via private messaging. And as a result, judges praised us all the time, because our teamwork from an objective perspective was stellar, very, very good. We didn't interrupt one another. It was equal division of speaking time for all rounds, just because we were chatting via private messaging, and arguments were divided according to our roles, which is something that obviously wouldn't really have been possible in person unless we practiced a lot before, so that we don't interrupt one another. But the obvious challenge with the digital environment has been technical difficulties. So sometimes we waited in one round to be placed from the main room into breakout rooms for our private discussion time, around 10 minutes. And then a mediator had technical issues which interrupted the flow of the conversation. It didn't really affect us in the end, because everyone was happy to, for example, repeat what you were saying. But maybe for the judges and for the observers, the process didn't feel as natural as if it had been in person, when you obviously don't interrupt such a mediation. So it definitely has its pros and cons aspect.
And I think one point kind of that you made that about challenges, and I think a key learning for us was really working on preparation and listening to your teammate and to those of the opposing counsel as well, so you can reform and adjust your strategy accordingly. And as Andra mentioned, we had to prepare each round, and sometimes this was as little as 24 hours notice with new confidential information and preparing new strategies. And I think what Andra was kind of hinting at that I did not mention in the beginning of this competition is that with respect to negotiations teams, we had to switch companies each round. We never knew which company we were going to be in the shoes of, whether it was the respondent or the claimant. And here we kind of had to think about what to project and what emotions and kind of what was in the minds of that particular client, and as counsel, how to accomplish that client's objectives. So I think that was particularly challenging in a truncated time frame. But with respect to the technology issues, I think it's actually realistic of what's happening now in ADR processes and mediation is that the world is adjusting to having essentially a blended approach to ADR. and both online and as well as, being in person again, hopefully. So I think kind of understanding those skills and adjusting those technological issues in the process is really critical, I think, to be able to be a successful practitioner, as there may be more virtual mediations, arbitrations, and the like in the future, even though we may also transition back to in-person hearings and our arguments as well.
Definitely. If I were to pick one word to describe challenges of the competition, is definitely adaptability from all perspectives, adapting to the confidential information, then to the other team, then to technical difficulties and any other sort of uncertain information we didn't have previously. What was your motivation, by the way, to sign up for the competition?
I think for me, I was really interested this year in building out negotiation skills. As a young lawyer, I had not had much exposure to negotiations and particularly the mediation process. And I thought this would be an excellent way to learn those skills. And in both my participation in a Queen Mary sponsored competition and this international competition, I really understood what it meant to be a negotiator rather than a litigator. And the skills are completely different. And you have to think about what the process is and what you're trying to achieve. And I think by doing this competition, it really exposed me to how mediation worked and what it could potentially be like in a realistic situation when in the future I am representing a client and have to kind of think about these issues. And, there can be opportunities if you're too litigious and adversarial in a mediation that the entire negotiations chill. And that may not be always what your client wants. Sometimes the client is prepared to do that. But if the parties are willing to come to mediation, generally there should be some room to resolve a dispute, and kind of learning what that means and kind of practicing those skills was a really valuable lesson for me and a reason that I chose to do this competition in particular. And I'm sure Andra has similar motivations, but if you have anything additional, I know for you, please feel free to add that.
Quite similar, and it feeds back into what I said earlier. I didn't know anything about mediation, and I was actually curious about the process since I'm part of the ADR Society, and it feels a bit weird just to ignore a branch of ADR. But then just to improve my negotiation skills in a different setting, and because the competition was international and the feedback that we received was absolutely amazing, it was a great way to develop, even though perhaps at the time when I signed up, I didn't know exactly how I'm going to use these skills in the future or what exactly I'm going to develop. I felt that it's never a bad way just to see what I can make out of the experience.
No, that's great. And I think kind of reflecting on everything we've talked about today, tying everything together, what advice would you have for other students who are interested in negotiation or mediation competitions and how to kind of seek out these opportunities?
I have a lot of advice, but just to keep it brief, maybe the first thing to do is sign up for such competitions. As we said, even though you don't know what negotiation is, what mediation is, you'll be amazed how quickly you develop in such a short period of time. For us, it was 1 week of competing, and every single round on different days, we felt the growth process. There are definitely student societies at every single university offering such opportunities. If not, the undergraduate office should be aware of competitions going on, because most of the times they receive such emails from other schools or other student societies organizing them. So if you're not sure where to look for, definitely just send an email to a student society or ask around some of your tutors and they will likely know. Second piece of advice is to get in touch with students and coaches so that you can form a very good team that is dedicated and willing to learn, as we said. And the last piece of advice is you might be interested in winning, and that's totally understandable. Everyone wants to win a competition for which they put all the effort. But I think it's important to perceive such competitions more holistically, and in particular as a great opportunity to meet new people and network with professionals from all over the world who are acting as your judges, then a lot of coaches and other students, as it was for us, from 4 other continents. And don't get too focused on the academic process and what you're doing during the round. Every single networking call, every single social, if the competitions are going to be in person, matters, so that you can have a holistic experience and make the most out of it.
No, and I think that's great advice, Andra. And, pick a competition of something that pulls you out of your comfort zone as well. I think for all of us that I had previously done an arbitration moot before and had the negotiations this year, but I really had never done anything that related to a mediation competition. And this was a great way to challenge myself, both as an LLM student, but also as a growing lawyer and a professional. So we both recommend kind of doing that challenge for yourself. And I think it's much more rewarding. And especially if you don't go in with the expectations of winning, you can actually take the most of the competition and really think about what you want to get out of it. So I think that's most of the advice we'll offer today. But I do want to say a thank you to our coach again, and to our other teammate who's not with us, Parnian, who was fantastic and actually progressed to the semifinals of the competition as well, and has a very bright future, I think, as a mediator if she so chooses. And I think that's it from us. Thank you very much, everyone, for listening.
Thank you.